Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success, a change conversation for leaders, project and change practitioners for today and tomorrow. My name is Therese Perez of myvirtualchangemanager.com, and I'm an experienced change and project professional and people leader with many years of experience in the industry. I love business, and I love the people side of business especially. So nothing lights me up more than seeing people use change management, project management, and strong change leadership to engage, motivate, and inspire people, and ultimately transform organisations. If you've heard about change management and have no idea of what it involves, then you're in the right place. If you know about change management, but you want to take your practices to the next level, then this is where you should be. I'm going to share the stories of my experiences, interview some fantastic people, and I'm going to explore all of the challenges and opportunities that you face in organisations right now. So please join me and let's go and have some fun. My name is Therese Perez and I'm the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. Hello and welcome. Today we are covering off the tension between change and projects, or projects and change, either way you look at it. Before I begin though, I would like to acknowledge that I am recording on Tharawal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording. Tension between projects and change, and I'm sure if you've worked in the world of change, you would be very familiar with this because there's a bunch of reasons why tension arises, and that tension could result in conflict. When I was a change practice manager, director, definitely there were escalations that were in the guise of performance, but oftentimes it was because of the different mind maps that a project manager and a change manager comes with in relation to their roles in a project or program. So let's uncover a couple of the core reasons why. And after having to deal with a lot of conflict or a lot of escalations, and as a change practice manager, some of those were valid around performance that needed to be dealt with. However, a lot of it had to do with, and also I should say there was at times a very strong willingness to unpack and understand better the role of the change manager. So from the project side, and that type of mindset really helped when it came to resolving conflict or tension around the roles and the functions that people had. It always comes down to two things. One will be a genuine performance issue. So I'm not really going to talk about too much about that today. I'm going to talk about the clash of mindset that takes place around the lack of clarity and around the different expectation for change and projects. So project management has been a far more enduring discipline within organizations. It formed up because obviously there was change that needed to take place in organizations, and the project discipline was a way of implementing change and uplift and continuous improvement in a structured and disciplined way. So it yielded efficiencies in and of itself, having project management and that discipline actually exist in organizations. And I have done my Prince, I've done some PMBOK, done some Agile, project management, all of those disciplines, they're all just different toolkits. I always talk about these tools are like building a house. So depending upon what type of house I wanted to build, I might use different tools depending upon what the requirement is, what's needed. And those different layers of project management absolutely have helped in managing teams, even in a BAU context, on how to form up the work, how to get a sense of progress, because I have debated for a long time now that there is no such thing as business as usual. Everything within organizations is in a state of constant cyclical change, if not intentional change, and therefore these disciplines become quite core for effective management, effective teaming. A lot of the, in the old days we call them soft skills, but a lot of the fundamental leadership skills, or the ability to bring together teams, have teams perform, those skill sets are fundamental in projects. as well as project management being fundamental in business as usual. So I could talk about that a lot. I'm not going to go into that today. But when we look at the project ecosystem, what happens when a project manager gets told, because sometimes they're told to have a change manager on the piece of work, and they may not be familiar with what that role entails. And that's the first step towards starting to create an environment in which conflict is going to ensue. And it really has to do with the project manager not understanding the role of the change manager, not just not understanding the role, but also then a change manager gets recruited, gets potentially assigned to the piece of work, and then starts to question the why of the project or program, the timelines, the resourcing, the effectiveness, because it all leads to the effectiveness and may compromise outcomes achieved by the program. Now, just that simple questioning can put a project manager or program manager under a threat state. And then an inevitable conflict will ensue if these things haven't been addressed or articulated. And then as the change manager keeps focused on effectiveness, the project manager has the natural tension around focusing on delivery. And when focusing on delivery, it's about getting the job done, and sometimes not about getting the job done well. Now, I'm not saying that is always the case with program or project managers. In fact, I have a lot of friends who I started off as work colleagues who I worked with extremely well. We had a shared vision. We had a shared value system around quality. We worked out each other's strengths and were flexible enough to really support each other in that strengths-based approach. You're good at this. Can you facilitate that workshop? You're really good at the planning, the reporting, those type of things. Me, not so much. So what do you need from me, which can be minimal, so that I can focus on my strengths? And just getting that common camaraderie happening and that sense of team and how we build a team together. So I've had the opportunity and the real positive experience around programs where that relationship has worked extremely well. Where there's been tension, and even as you know, in some spaces I've been the change manager where there's been tension with the project lead and project manager, and it's come down to the perspective of threat. So feeling like the change person is taking over the project management side. And to be honest, at times I have absolutely stepped over that line. And that hasn't been cool from a stakeholder or a team perspective. And this really comes down to respecting boundaries, being clear on the roles, the deliverables, the timeframes, and respecting those boundaries. The area in which there can be frustration is around issues being raised but not being captured, or being escalated, or being provided visibility to the sponsor. And sometimes that tension can definitely be there. At times from the project side, there's a bit of empathy and consideration to the fact that it could be, the individual could be in an organisation that doesn't necessarily want to look at risk or doesn't want to hear the concerns. And from the change side, sometimes there can be frustration that they're raising issues, but that's not actually going through the formal process. And I really do encourage that if you're a change practitioner listening to this, that you are actually using the project structure to be able to, and the project discipline to be able to air your concerns. There typically would be a risk register, there would be a status, there would be commentary, and contributing to that is really important. And I think getting that agreement from the project side that there might be certain indicators that the change side would need to provide, and the commentary, associated commentary to that, so that their view is being incorporated. I always talk about the project and the change side being kind of the yin and the yang of a complete program, and making sure that both have a voice is really important. Sometimes there can be frustration around not getting the seat at the table when it comes to steering committees. And this is really important too, just to note that once again, if you're on the change side, that you don't necessarily get a mandated seat at that table. And sometimes it takes for you to be invited to that table. And in fact, it's more powerful if you're invited rather than trying to push or force your way into that steering committee. Is if you're contributing and you're working well with your project or program manager, they're often going to invite you to that table so that you can do a change update. You can talk about the requirements. You can talk about whether sponsorship is happening, is active, and then also report back on the change experience and the change readiness as well, if required, on your project or program. So be comfortable in not needing that seat at the table because you're automatically not going to be given it. Oftentimes it takes a while for change to earn that right, and the project or program manager who can trust that you're going to present a picture that they're comfortable with is important as well. And I've always been comfortable in that space of not needing the seat at the table, but then from my perspective, I don't have a core driver around needing to have profile or needing to have a sense of significance. Some others do, and you might want to reflect on that for yourself around your own behaviours. If you're finding that you're really frustrated in that space, you can use the tools that the project or program manager has to raise your concerns, and eventually when you build the trust and you become the trusted voice, you will be invited to the table. So a couple of common points of tension that happens between projects or programs and change practitioners within a project or program. There is also a frustration that happens around the ask between a project or program manager and then the inability to deliver on the change side. And I do want to talk about this because I think it's important when forming a team. How you assess performance from a change perspective is very much around being able to interview well, ask the right questions. I actually, in one of the earlier episodes, have talked about interviewing for change and recruiting and resourcing models for change. All of that will contribute to whether there is tension between the project manager and change manager, or program manager and change program manager, or not. Because if your resourcing is right, if everyone's feeling heard, if you have a strong sense of team, if you're working well with your sponsor, it is very rare that you would have tension between your program or project manager. I think the fundamental as well is respect between both roles and respecting each other's role in a project or program. There are also two mind maps around whether program managers and change practitioners are peers or whether they are a subordinate reporting into. Both models can work. Certainly, I have had times where I've reported into a project or program manager, hasn't worried me in the least, and we essentially have the dynamic of peers because I'm supporting them, helping them with what they're doing, going and engaging with the business, and oftentimes we're seen as being on the same level, even though the reporting line may be from myself into the project or program manager through my career. A lot of tension, to be honest, is driven from ego, and the more self-aware you are as a practitioner, whether it's a program or a change practitioner, around your drivers, your motivators, and then understanding yourself is going to have you understand your peers and your team better. It's going to have you work better with others and be able to handle different points of tension or frustration. Some key things that you can do if you're finding that there is tension between projects and change is let's recap on and revisit the roles and responsibilities. Let's have a look at who's accountable for what. Let's also try and connect on a human level versus just a project or program level. And I often suggest this. The first question sometimes when someone isn't getting along with someone is, well, have you taken them for coffee or tea or hot chocolate, whatever their preferred beverage is, but have you actually connected with them as a person? Because if everything's just about business and you're really struggling versus just getting to know that person and understand them better and see where they're coming from, then you will always have this tension continually arise. And I talk a little bit about patterning in this world. So I've talked a little bit about that, when you're in the workplace, your patterns show up, behavioral patterns. And I will do a special series on this around workplace dynamics and how you can navigate those, because it absolutely fundamentally can impact the success of projects or programs. But I've always taken the viewpoint that every interaction I have is an opportunity for a lesson to learn, which means that I have some people who I connect with fabulously. We have similar value systems, we have similar ways of working. We're obviously different in our individual styles. However, I really enjoy working with them and it's fun. And then there are some where it's a constant struggle. And when it comes down to that, the key thing to look at is what's plugging me in about this person. Why am I finding it so difficult to work with them or to communicate with them? And then obviously go have a coffee with them or a tea or a hot chocolate, but also really exploring what's coming up for me. And is this a pattern? Like, do they remind me of anyone? Like, has this come up for me before? What's the lesson that I can learn and how can I change my behavior in this? Oftentimes it's if I'm tired. So sometimes it's about self-maintenance, being able to not engage or not walk away frustrated from the interaction. Sometimes it's making sure that it is a repeated pattern and how do I unpack that for myself, and where does this actually stem from, and does it serve me to have this belief about this person, or should it be something that I recalibrate and replace? And belief systems can be real core drivers, and oftentimes when I have that feeling of frustration, it can be because I'm focused on an outcome and I want forward movement, and this person is not helping me do that. And that can happen often in projects or in change, just in general, is that you see someone as an obstacle or someone who just doesn't get it. And that's a very ego-based view of the world to have. And so reflecting on that for yourself, because you can't control the other person's behavior nor their response, but you can change the way in which you're approaching the conversation or the relationship, absolutely, and how you're responding more than likely emotionally to that and unpacking that for yourself. So that self-reflection piece is really critical. So there's a few different gold nuggets in this for you around how you can approach people if you're struggling around roles, the role requirement. Then also you have a choice off the back of that around whether that role is for you. And as you become more experienced in this space, and to be honest, probably career-wise, if you're further along in your career, you get better at this, is really understanding what the other person wants from you and then choosing whether that's what you want for yourself. And there's no shame or there's no issue in actually walking away from something where you were like, I think you want something different to what I want to offer. And also I want this to be a win-win and I want to grow in my roles. And that's a fundamental thing for myself personally, that every single role I take or every single opportunity I explore is about growth. And yet if it's not a win-win, then it's probably time to walk away. I hope that's helped, and come and visit us at myvirtualchangemanager.com. We have lots of tools, we have lots of tips. We're building things all the time and providing them to anyone who visits the site. Sign up for our newsletter, keep in touch. And if you enjoy this podcast, if you've been listening to it, it's been adding value, giving you food for thought in the change space, then please leave a review, recommend it to others who are working in this industry. Our intent, and I keep stating it, is to ensure that change happens where people are at the center of it, that there are win-wins for people and fundamental respect for each other. Have a great day, and remember that change matters because your people matter.